So we have the story of the widow of Nain. Where is Nain? We actually don't know. We don't know. If I could show you a map, which I will. Actually, I have a map on my own computer. I don't know why I'm going to the internet. Here we are, pictures. And let's see here. Don't worry, there's nothing that I would be embarrassed to show you. The ancient Near East, whoops, seems like some of my files are corrupted. Let's see, Palestine. Let's see what I got of Palestine. Okay, these will do. I'm just looking for one that might be, let's try this one. Let's try one in color. There we go. See if we can clean that up a little bit. Okay. In fact, on this map, they might even try to show you where Palestine is. Or, excuse me, Palestine. Try to show you where Nain is. There's the belief. There we go, right here. See, they really should have a question mark, because we're not sure that this is the actual town of Nain. Maybe, I think 100 years ago or so, an archaeologist found this place, and maybe things have changed, and they found more evidence that this was the town of Nain. But you know, Luke doesn't really specify where it is. In fact, he kind of assumes that you don't know, because to a city called Nain, you know, he doesn't say he just journeyed to Nain, like the reader would have already known. But, you know, so some scholars say, well, then it wasn't a well-known city. You know, he had to tell his readers that this was the name of the city. But you also have to remember that Luke is writing his stories for people who did not live in Palestine, did not live in the area. So if I were telling you about New Jersey, you know, well, I live in a town called Sparta. You know, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a nothing town or that no one knows about it. But if I were, you know, talking to somebody from California, I'd say, you know, I live in a town called Sparta in New Jersey. There is a mention of a city of Nain somewhere down here, or in this region. I'm showing you beyond the Jordan River. The Jordan River kind of flows down the river, flows down this valley into the Dead Sea. And there was supposedly somewhere along here a city, a town of Nain, but apparently that doesn't have a lot of supporters for being the actual town. Maybe because it's so far away from Galilee, I don't know. But whatever. So it's one of these things where until we get up to the pearly gates and can actually say to Jesus, hey, Jesus, which town was this? You know, if you care after you're dead, you know, then you can find out. But as it is right now, we just know that it happened in some town called Nain. Jesus arrives there, and as he arrives there, a dead man is being brought out for burial. Presumably for burial. I'm assuming they're not taking the body out to throw it into the garbage. Okay? You know? There are mourners there. The body is on a bier or a coffin. It's in a coffin, which is not like our coffins. It would have been like a bunch of reeds on a mat. Okay? So it would not have been, like a modern day coffin. You have to remember this is 2,000 years ago. The Greek is interesting here because it says, as Jesus drew near to the gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out. And that's not literally what the Greek says. The Greek is a little bit more roundabout, one who had died. I mean, I guess you could say a man who had died, but it's less specific. It's clear that it's a male, but it's one who had died. Literally. Or one who was dead could be another way that you would translate. One who was dead was being carried out. So the person who had died is being kind of mentioned in a very indirect way. All right, so one who had died or one who was dead was being carried out, the only son of his mother. And the word here, only son, is actually the only begotten. It's a Greek word, monogenes, actually. Let me look at my... See, this is what Mr. Dunn does to study. Let's look at the actual Greek word. Monogenes. It's a long E. It's a long E. Go back to this, monogenes. That's why there's a line over the E, which is only begotten. Or one could say the only born. There's another way one could say this for a woman. The only one who had been born of this woman. So she had only one child, apparently. We can tell from this Greek, because the Greek word monos, and those of you who are nursing or whatever, you know these words already. You know monos means one or singular or single, perhaps I'll put here. You know, like if anyone's ever had mononucleosis. You know, the kissing disease or whatever they call it. I've never had it, but it seems like that seems to be like the #1 college or university disease that people get. They go to college and they get mononucleosis, and they're wiped out for the rest of the year. I actually had a friend who caught that, and he told me, you know, about it. You know, how it makes you very tired. You know, you can't move, don't want to move. I don't honestly know what it is. But I know mono is part of it. Monos, which means one or singular. And this word genes is related to the word, the Greek word geneia, from which we get words like, you know, gene, you know, generation, etc., and so forth. So that idea of procreation or of, well, yeah, that idea of procreation. Literally, the word geneia in English means race or family. So this woman was not in a good state because not just because she had just lost her only son. I mean, for any mother, for any parent to lose your only child is an awful experience. I can imagine. I've never had that happen to me, but I can sympathize with it, surely. But Luke adds, and she was a widow. And what is a widow? A widow is a woman who does not have a husband. Her husband has died. And a man whose wife has died is a widower. So a widow is a woman whose husband has died. And a widower would be a man. So she had really nobody now. She had no husband, and she had no son. And if he was her only son, she now had no support. She was essentially now a zero in society. You have to understand how societies functioned in the ancient Near East, and perhaps functioned in other societies as well, but in the ancient Near East, there was no social support system like we have grown up with and we understand it today. We just take it for granted that the government will be there, or a church community, or whatever, you know, but especially government. There was nothing like that. Your support system was your family, which was a reason people typically had a lot of children, and if they did not have a lot of children, they were viewed as perhaps less societally. And because if you had a husband, he was supposed to take care of you. And I know that doesn't sound politically correct, or that doesn't sound very acceptable by today's standards. But just think, in the United States 50 years ago or 60 years ago, what the culture was like then. I live in a community which has a lot of elderly people in it. My mom being one of them. My brother is handicapped. That's one of the reasons we're here. But there are a lot of elderly people. And when we first moved in here, which was about 20 years ago, it was surprising how many of the women living here did not know how to drive a car. And it's interesting to see kind of like the generational change, because over the last 20 years, I mean, when we first came here, they didn't need a lot of parking spaces because most of the people coming in, especially the elderly women, didn't know how to drive cars. So they took the bus, or they found someone who did drive a car to drive them places. But as it got into like the 90s, and you had a different generation of women, elderly women, moving in, who did know how to drive cars, because of course you had the sexual revolution and you know, all that stuff. They needed to start building more parking spaces. It was interesting to see. And so kind of like put it in that context, 2,000 years ago, the husband was the one who was basically the bread earner, the one who earned money for the family to feed the family, and the woman was the one who would stay home and would make the food and keep the house. Both jobs were necessary. I mean, anyone who has ever lived on his or her own, you know how difficult it is. You know, you come home at the end of the day and, you know, you don't want to make a big meal. You know, you don't want, you have to make, you know, you make the big meal, you eat it, and then you have to clean everything up. You know, and if it's just you, it becomes an imposition. So a lot of young people, they eat out. They have someone else make the food for them. They throw something in the microwave. Unless, of course, you like to cook, and then, you know, it's great. But it wasn't just, you know, male chauvinism that caused these social structures to evolve into place. Okay, there was also a lot of necessity. You needed someone to earn money to live, to buy the food you were going to eat. You needed someone, I mean, to make the food was an all-day affair. You know, to grind the bread and to make meat, prepare the meat, etc. and so forth. So anyways, so this woman had no husband, but now her son has died. See, in the ancient world, if your husband died and you had a family, that was still okay, as long as you had sons. You know, the firstborn son was usually the one who was expected to take in the widowed mother, okay, and to bring him into his family and to take care of her. If you had daughters, I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to say about daughters. I would presume something would have been done if you had daughters, but obligation-wise, you look to the firstborn son. If the firstborn son was dead, then you just go down the line. Who was the next eldest son? Okay, and that was his obligation to take in the mother. But as you can see from the story, her only son, not just her firstborn, but her only son, is dead.